The question about whether or not Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators were monsters has been asked and answered. Of course they're monsters. They're among the most vile humans ever to exist. But the question now becomes this: are there other monsters out there? And if so, what does accountability look like? The Justice Department's newly released files are causing a stir throughout politics, the business world, academia, Hollywood, and in countries across the world. Governments abroad are opening investigations. Officials are being asked, or forced, I should say, to step down. Many are publicly distancing themselves from anybody tied to Epstein's vast network, regardless of how innocently they may have been. But I don't even know if that's the word we should be using here. But I'll get back to that in a second. Here's the thing, though. While other countries are pursuing criminal accountability, while they are demanding that public officials, elected officials, step down, if not only if they were actively involved with Jeffrey Epstein socially or financially, separate and apart from his crime, but even if they associated with somebody who associated with Jeffrey Epstein, that's how seriously other countries are taking this absolutely horrific scandal. But that is not happening in the United States of America. In fact, the Republican Party is bending over backwards, is falling all over itself to continue to cover for the one person in all of this who has been acting the most guilty ever since this became an issue. That would be Donald, of course. I mean, I'm not saying he is guilty. I have absolutely no insider knowledge into it. What I'm saying is he has been acting guiltier than anybody else. We also know that up until 2 days ago, we were told he was mentioned in the Epstein files 38,000 times, which seems like a lot to me. However, Representative Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, informed us, I think it was yesterday, hard to know though, because it's another one of those weeks, that after the DOJ released another 3 million documents, which is only half of the existing documents in their possession, Donald is actually mentioned over 1 million times in the Epstein files. Not only is DOJ, especially Todd Blanche and Pam Bondi, covering for Donald, they are also actively refusing, one, to identify the predators, those who indeed might be co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein's, and two, protect the victims. They have no interest in doing either one of those things. They do, however, continue to seem interested in pursuing Bill and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is not mentioned in the Epstein files at all, from what I understand. Here's an uncomfortable question. Is appearing in the Epstein files proof of wrongdoing? Or let's put it another way. Is it enough to appear in the Epstein files to be tainted by them? When it comes to Bill Clinton, he's denied all misconduct. And I have to be honest, if he has done anything, if it can be proven that he has done anything criminal, that's a different conversation. But we know that one of the ways in which Jeffrey Epstein became so influential, became so connected to the rich and powerful, is because he used his money to create connections to institutions of higher learning and banks and foundations like the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane because they were going to some fundraising events for the Clinton Foundation, to which Jeffrey Epstein gave money. That's how he did it. So if that's the reason somebody's mentioned in the Epstein files, and that's the only reason somebody's mentioned in the Epstein files, I think that's the end of that conversation, unless and until something else comes to light. In the private sector, some people are being forced to resign, but as many as a dozen officials in the Trump regime, actually, even including the first Trump administration, Alex Acosta, who was essentially responsible for allowing Jeffrey Epstein to continue to commit his horrific crimes for almost a decade beyond when he should have been able to, are implicated. Over a dozen, I think, at this point, people closely associated to Donald and the Trump regime. We're talking about people like Elon Musk, Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of the Navy, Mehmet Oz. And yet, the DOJ has made it explicitly clear that it will do absolutely nothing about any of this. Which means that for the time being, our hands are tied. Hopefully, we will have an opportunity in the not too distant future to rectify the situation. But then there's another issue that we should be able to do something about. Absent criminal wrongdoing, here's a quick rule of thumb. Anybody who continued to socialize with, befriend, after his 2006 conviction for an underage girl, knowing that he did that and knowing that he got away with it, well, they should lose everything. They should lose their fortune. They should lose their reputation. They should essentially lose their ability to be accepted by polite society or society of any kind, quite frankly. Then, of course, if they are found to be criminally liable, any of them, regardless of political party or ideology or standing in the world, lock them up and throw away the key. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of Mary Trump Live. It is great to be here with you finally. Sorry for my absence. I was sick. So thank you so much. One, for your patience. Two, to Brian and Adam, who, oh, that's so familiar of me. Brian Karam and Adam Parkamenko for filling in. They did such a phenomenal job, especially since all of the news was kind of awful. I feel especially bad for Adam because he had to deal with the hearing with Pam Bondi. Sorry, Adam. So anyway, it was so generous of them to fill in, and I apologize again, but I was very seriously under the weather. But I'm back, and I'm in an undisclosed location. So unfortunately, I had to start with more bad news. And this is something I have a very difficult time talking about because it's climate catastrophe and gun violence are two things that I try to avoid at all costs because I find them so disturbing that I just don't like talking about them. However, we must, because this is a significant development, and if we don't figure out a way to reverse this one quickly, well, the consequences will be grave. Because yesterday, Donald, who, as we recently learned, is, what do they call him? Like the king of clean coal or something, despite the fact that that's an oxymoron and he's a moron. Just, wholly owned by dirty energy companies. He announced, because he cares so much about the environment and for reasons I don't begin to understand, he hates wind. He's rescinding the federal government's 2009 scientific determination that climate change endangers public health and the environment. That determination, known as the endangerment finding, concluded in more than 200 pages of research that greenhouse gas emissions pose a danger to Americans' health and welfare. For nearly 17 years, the Environmental Protection Agency used the endangerment finding as the legal foundation to regulate carbon dioxide, methane, and 4 other greenhouse gases from oil and gas wells, tailpipes, smokestacks, and other fossil fuel sources. And that allowed the government to place restrictions on certain kinds of activity and force certain corporations that broke those regulations to pay fines that would help reverse the damage, et cetera, et cetera. But by eliminating that finding, the Trump regime is effectively removing the government's authority to limit emissions. Pollutants that scientists say are intensifying heat waves, droughts, wildfires, and other extreme weather like hurricanes. Apparently, that is not something the Environmental Protection Agency is in the business of having anything to do about. In other words, the Environmental Protection Agency is no longer in the business of protecting our environment. The move rejects decades of scientific consensus, previously accepted by presidents from both parties, including Richard Nixon and George H.W. Bush. On Wednesday, Donald's Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who will probably become much richer because of Donald's decision to eliminate the endangerment finding, went on Fox Day TV to invite Americans to celebrate the basic elimination of greenhouse gas limitations, which is making me feel angry before we even watch this clip.
This endangerment finding was on top of it was a house of cards. This knocks over the whole thing. This has been since the Obama administration forward. There's been 20 years of cost placed on the American consumer, but it wasn't like they had a chance to vote on it. It wasn't like Congress had a chance to have a say. I mean, the cost of whether it was your automobile that you were driving or the gas heater that you were putting in your home, any of these things just raised the cost on American consumers without their choice. And then some states following suit and then banning consumer choice and saying it must be a certain type of product, like it has to be electric, it can't be natural gas. All of these things driven by the endangerment finding. This is a huge, huge break for every American. This is part of President Trump making things affordable again in this country, and a policy of energy abundance and energy dominance. I mean, this is just a massive change. Kudos to all the team that worked on this thing to put this together. Really exciting. Every American should get up tomorrow and hold a celebration.
Yeah, kudos to everybody who is actively trying to shorten the life of not just the human race, but our planet. And it's corporations that picked up the cost and cut into their profits, and that's why they didn't like it. Because apparently, and this is a paradox I'm still trying to figure out, apparently the obscenely wealthy CEOs of such corporations think that they're going to be just fine when the climate apocalypse is upon us. I mean, I guess if you're really okay with living in a bunker for the rest of your life. So, according to the Environmental Defense Fund, this monumental, devastating change could increase U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 10% over the next 30 years, potentially contributing to as many as 58,000 premature deaths. And this is a fun fact, 37 million additional asthma attacks by 2055, because who among us needs to breathe? We are supposed to be, and have been up until recently, actively trying to decrease the amount of emissions, and a 10% increase over the next 30 years. Not a climate scientist, but I'm fairly certain that that is something we don't come back from. At a White House press event, alongside his handpicked EPA chief, former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin, who knows nothing about the environment, protecting it, or how the EPA works, Donald went to the podium to announce the decision, and he was asked what he would say to Americans who are worried, because you know how good he is at comforting us. Take a look at his response.
What do you tell Americans who are concerned that the $1.3 trillion in savings does come at a cost to public health and the environment based on science?
I tell them don't worry about it because it has nothing to do with public health. This was all a scam, a giant scam. This was a ripoff of the country by Obama and Biden. And let's say Obama started it and got it rolling. And a terrible ripoff. They'll have more money to spend for health care, if you look at it. Now they can go out and spend it on something that's meaningful. And nobody's doing more for health care than the Republican Party.
Oh, right. The Republican Party that has been trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act since it became law. The Republican Party that is trying desperately to eliminate all kinds of social safety net programs. Let's say, I mean, it is not true. It was not a scam, because if it was a scam, where was the scam? Like, who benefited from, I mean, monetarily, from cleaning up the planet, right? So, but let's, for the sake of argument, pretend that we're going to save all kinds of money now, like all of us, not just the corporations. Do we seriously think they're going to use that extra money to pay for all of the healthcare people are going to need to help treat those 37 million additional cases of asthma? I think not. Zeldin appeared on Fox this morning to justify the rollback. Watch this.
You believe that the talk of climate change is a hoax?
When you're putting forth tens of billions of dollars to pay off your well-connected former Obama and Biden admin officials and Democratic donors, wasting taxpayer dollars, yeah, that's a problem. Trillions of dollars of regulation and costs on American families, that's a big problem. It has been a con job of using this for more power and control.
That would be a no. Climate change is not a hoax. He didn't answer the question because he couldn't answer it honestly. Because a government, or not a government shutdown, but because a shutdown is looming, the Republicans fled town. They cleared the Capitol last night, leaving a day early before tonight's midnight deadline to fund the Department of Homeland Security, because, again, the Republican Party is not interested in governing, and even if they were, they don't know how to. Lawmakers deadlocked over new limits on immigration officers, left for a security conference in Munich, or began a week-long recess despite the looming shutdown. Congress has already financed the rest of the government, meaning about 4% of federal operations would be affected. Republicans briefly appeared to soften their stance after federal agents killed 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis, but they're back to being combative and prepubescent, perhaps is the best way of putting it, although not fair to prepubescents. Recalcitrant, I think that's the word I was looking for, and whiny. Democrats argue public opinion favors them, citing polling that shows broad disapproval of ICE tactics, particularly after footage showed masked agents shooting U.S. citizens and taking very small children into custody, and also, by the way, leaving them there. Leaders of both parties said there was no reason to keep members in Washington without legislation ready for votes. Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, said, quote, "We're not even going to pretend that we're trying to figure it out. It doesn't look great," unquote. There's leadership for you. The stalled bill funds DHS agencies, including FEMA, which has been rendered toothless by the Trump regime anyway, and the Coast Guard, which has also been boxed out of doing its job in the Caribbean Sea, because instead of having the Coast Guard stop boats that are potential threats and board them and search them, we just blow boats up now. So who needs the Coast Guard anyway? ICE and Customs and Border Protection, however, were funded earlier, and they're going to continue to operate without interruption, because they weren't just funded, they were refunded to such a degree that the government could be shut down for the next 20 years and ICE and CPB would still be able to function because they got tens and tens of billions of dollars to terrorize American citizens, undocumented workers, and immigrants in American cities and also in rural towns, which nobody's talking about enough. But we will. Not tonight, though. I want to talk about the tariff vote that hopefully is a sign of things to come. Politico reports that a small group of House Republicans has triggered a wave of votes on Donald's tariff policies, giving Democrats fresh ammunition on affordability ahead of the November midterms. 6 Republicans joined Democrats to overturn Donald's Canada tariffs, but only after 3 defied Speaker Mike Johnson the day before, blocking a rule that would have stopped the vote. The measure now heads toward a likely veto by Donald, but again, gauntlet thrown. Democrats plan to force at least 3 more votes targeting tariffs on Mexico, Brazil, and the Global Liberation Day tariffs, if you remember those. The resolutions are moving under expedited procedures that GOP leaders can't easily block. And the votes are already squeezing farm state Republicans as tariff battles continue to weigh on agricultural exports. Yes, farmers are not doing well, all because of the economic policies of the Trump regime that Donald will not let go of. On Wednesday, Donald posted the following on his failing social media site, quote, "Any Republican in the House or the Senate that votes against tariffs will seriously suffer the consequences come election time, and that includes primaries. Tariffs have given us economic and national security, and no Republican should be responsible for destroying this privilege," unquote. Thank you for your attention to this matter. That is the President of the United States essentially threatening to interfere with local and state elections because somebody in his party had the audacity to have a slightly different point of view. The Republicans siding with Democrats were Don Bacon of Nebraska, Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Kevin Kiley of Colorado, Dan Newhouse of Washington, and Jeff Hurt of Colorado. So let's not go too far in believing for a second that they're reformed, but credit where credit is due. They still probably vote with Donald 92% of the time, which is true of Massey, who is, however, leading the crusade about the Epstein files. So again, credit where credit is due. We'll take a win when we get them. Representative Susan Del Bene of Washington, who chairs the House Democratic campaign arm, said in an interview that her team will, quote, "continue to hold every single vulnerable Republican responsible for their broken promise to lower prices. If Republicans think this is such a great idea, then they can vote to support the tariffs. But we're going to make sure that they're accountable for their votes," unquote. Yes, accountability. What does it look like again? I think what it's going to look like if we hang together and keep the momentum going, because Democrats keep winning elections they really would not have won even a year ago. Let's make sure that 2026 becomes the biggest wave election in modern American history. Then we can get our accountability. Did you know this? The only reason I know this is because today's February 13th. Oh, it's Friday the 13th, but I am not superstitious. So to me, it's just another Friday, to the extent that Fridays have any meaning anymore. Well, that means that tomorrow's February 14th. See, unlike the other enumerate in my family, I can count, even by ones. So that means it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. So to those of you who celebrate, happy Valentine's Day. I hope you don't like chocolate. The Independent reports that Valentine's Day chocolate prices are rising, even as global cocoa prices have fallen from record highs. A Lending Tree study found box assortments are up 11.8% on average since last February, with some nearly doubling in price. Cocoa prices have dropped nearly 30% in the last month, but much of the chocolate now on the shelves was made with cocoa purchased at peak prices. See, we can't get a break. Trade policy has also added pressure. While tariffs on cocoa beans, paste, and butter were lifted in mid-November, some imported brands still face a 15% added cost, helping keep retail prices elevated despite the recent drop in cocoa markets. Because America. All right, we've got to get to our emotional support moment. If you guys are looking for fearless, independent analysis, the kind that does not pull punches, which we do not, please subscribe to my Substack, The Good in Us. Listen to the Mary Trump podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. And, you can also check out our Patreon page. We have lots of extra content over there. And don't forget to check out our merch, because I like it. I got the sweatshirt. I wore the sweatshirt and I have the mug now. It's very exciting. All right. With that, it is the end of the week. I thank you again so much for your patience and letting me get some rest so I didn't stay sick, because the coming climate catastrophe is not going to be good for my respiratory illness. So we really need an emotional support moment, and I truly hope you get to unplug this weekend. We are going to the Great Barrier Reef. Breathe, relax, take it in, and watch. That was a good one. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I really needed that. Again, I truly hope you all get to unplug this week. I hope we have a weekend. And if we don't, just pretend we do and don't pay attention to what's going on. Thank you so much, everybody watching on YouTube, streaming on Twitter, and over at The Good in Us, to everybody listening to the podcast, to all of our new members, people giving memberships, our super stickers, everybody giving us donations. We truly appreciate you. To our awesome moderators for just doing the work day in, day out, and keeping us all safe and happy. And of course, to my utterly amazing team. You guys blow me out of the water on a daily basis. So thank you. I will be back on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget, we have videos dropping every day. Easy way to support us other than subscribing to the channel. Just look, watch, and share those videos. Comment on them, like them. Simple. All right, everybody, that does it for us. I will see you Monday. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind. Bye.